History under Al Capone and the Fall of the Chicago Outfit. Chicago, 1920. The city hums like a heated engine. Immigrants, workers, endless construction scaffolds, trolley tracks, and shadows. Long, dangerous shadows where gangs roam. Every neighborhood is a microcosm of power, with constant struggles to dominate territory. The law feels like a distant legend, often ignored entirely. Amidst this chaos appears a man who would become a historic figure, Johnny Torrio. Not the first criminal in Chicago, but the first to understand. To win, you don't just intimidate, you organize. Torrio watched smaller gangs destroy themselves through blind violence. Money was being wasted by those who lacked strategy. He began gathering people, petty criminals, war veterans, desperate immigrants without prospects. He told them, "You are not individuals. You are a system, and a system can rule the city." In this environment, Torrio honed his methods. He found men who could stay silent when necessary, who could pay bribes without question. He did something revolutionary. He turned scattered groups into a hierarchy, a structure with rules, punishments, and control mechanisms. On the streets, this appeared as power. Among the smaller gangs, it looked like survival. Into this system came a young man named Alphonse Gabriel Capone, known to history as Al Capone. Energetic, fearless, quick to learn, he had a rare understanding. True power was not in gunfire alone, but in strategy, organization, and respect. Capone saw the streets as a chessboard. Chaos was not his goal. Control was. Under his command, Torrio's network became more than a gang. It became a system. Secret warehouses, transportation routes, hidden markets, people working not by instinct, but by agreement. Within the outfit, spontaneity was eliminated. Everything had purpose. Bootlegging operations generated enormous profit, guarded better than banks. Money was funneled through legitimate businesses as cover. Internal courts resolved disputes between members. Every operation contributed upward payments. Families of imprisoned members were supported. Veterans had quasi-pension systems. Intelligence networks provided information from police, city officials, and newspapers. This was no ordinary gang. It was a micro-society, growing until it dominated the city. Al Capone became the face of the outfit, not because he was the best killer, but because he understood how to manage people and power inside society, not outside it. And in that moment, as he took his place, the true era of the Chicago outfit began. The Prohibition era was a fateful gift for organized crime. When the government said, "This product must not exist," the outfit said, "Then we'll make it available." Money flowed like a river, and power expanded with profits. Capone realized two things instantly. People wanted alcohol. They were willing to pay immense sums for something forbidden. Under his leadership, the outfit didn't just supply alcohol, they controlled the entire cycle. Hidden distilleries on city outskirts, secret warehouses and clandestine delivery routes, shell companies as legal cover, professional drivers and couriers, informants in police, city hall, and media. A network of bribery protecting operations from above. The money poured in. The outfit's power grew exponentially. Capone's genius lay in seeing the outfit not as a street gang, but as a disciplined organization. He structured it almost like a corporation. Leader, Capone himself. Advisors and lieutenants. Operations division, bootlegging, gambling. Financial division, money laundering. Security and intelligence teams. Every member knew their role. Bootlegging profits weren't the only gain. The outfit controlled city infrastructure, factories, ports, police and local law enforcement, freight contracts, nightclubs, and restaurants. It was influence, control, and authority over daily city life. By the late 1920s, the outfit was so powerful that its leaders dined with mayors, influenced elections, and manipulated economic flows. This was not mere criminality. It was a shadow government blending politics, business, and crime. By 1925, Capone had become more than a gangster. He was a symbol of authority. His name instilled fear among criminals and commanded respect among the wealthy and powerful alike. The outfit seemed unstoppable because it was meticulously organized. It controlled countless people. It had unparalleled intelligence. Its influence reached law enforcement and politicians. Capone used violence strategically. Mass murders were rare but served as powerful messages. The most notorious example, Valentine's Day Massacre, February 14, 1929. 7 men from a rival gang were killed in a warehouse. This was a deliberate, calculated act of terror. Capone understood this. Fear attracts attention. Respect preserves authority. To the police, the outfit's violence was visible, but not the system behind it. Journalists reported shootings, but could not grasp the network controlling them. Citizens only saw the spectacle, not the machinery maintaining it. The outfit operated like a shadow organism, precise, calculated, nearly untouchable. What Chicago saw was noise, gunshots echoing through alleys, bodies found behind butcher shops, headlines screaming names, dates, numbers of the dead. What the city did not see was the machine that produced this noise, a machine that did not run on rage or impulse, but on planning, patience, and discipline. The Chicago outfit did not function like a gang. It functioned like an institution. Violence was never the core of its power. Violence was a signal. Expensive, rare, intentional. Every bullet cost money, attention, risk. Capone understood this better than anyone. A street thug killed because he was angry. The outfit killed because it was efficient. Behind every public act of brutality existed layers of quiet administration. Decisions were discussed in back rooms filled with cigar smoke and ledgers, not shouting. Meetings happened at dinner tables, in barber shops, in offices disguised as import companies. Orders were passed carefully, often indirectly. Names were avoided. Nothing was written that did not have to be written. The outfit had rules. Not moral rules, but operational ones. They governed survival. A man could steal from outsiders, never from the outfit. A man could fight enemies, never start wars without approval. A man could enjoy wealth, never flaunt it. And above all, silence was life. Breaking these rules did not always mean death. Sometimes it meant removal, a job reassigned, territory taken away, protection withdrawn. In a city like Chicago, that was often worse than a bullet. Capone personally enforced one principle above all others: loyalty must be profitable. Fear created obedience, but profit created commitment. That is why the outfit invested heavily in families. When a soldier was arrested, his wife did not starve. When children needed schooling, connections appeared. When an old man could no longer work, he wasn't abandoned. He was remembered. This wasn't kindness. It was structure. A man who knows his family is safe becomes predictable. Predictable men do not betray organizations. Money flowed upward through the system, but it also flowed downward. This circulation kept the organism alive. Internally, disputes were not settled with fists. They were settled through internal arbitration. Senior figures listened. Evidence was presented. Decisions were final. Public violence between members was unacceptable. It suggested weakness. The outfit understood something governments often forget. Legitimacy is not about morality. It is about consistency. And for nearly a decade, the Chicago outfit was brutally consistent. Al Capone was not the smartest man in the room. He was not the most educated. He was not the most articulate. But he possessed a rare instinct. He knew when to stop. Other gang leaders saw expansion as conquest. Capone saw it as absorption. When smaller gangs emerged, he didn't rush to destroy them. He studied them. Who led them? Who followed? Who wanted more? Who feared losing everything? Then he offered choices framed as inevitabilities. Join and earn, quietly, safely, regularly, or resist, briefly. Most chose the first option. This strategy avoided unnecessary wars and preserved profits. Chicago did not become a battlefield. It became a web. Territories overlapped through agreements. Profits were divided mathematically. Violence became rare enough to be shocking when it occurred, which made it effective. Capone also avoided something that destroyed many crime bosses: paranoia. He trusted systems more than individuals. That meant no single person controlled everything. Finances were separated from enforcement. Enforcement was separated from intelligence. Intelligence was separated from leadership. If one part was compromised, the rest could survive. For a time, this worked. Capone also understood public perception. During the Great Depression, while banks collapsed and politicians argued, Capone opened soup kitchens. Thousands were fed daily. Cameras captured smiling faces. Newspapers printed images that confused the public. Was he a criminal? Yes. Was he helping when the government failed? Also yes. This moral ambiguity protected him. Jurors were human. Judges were political. Witnesses were unreliable. And Chicago itself was conflicted. The outfit didn't just rule through fear. It ruled through usefulness. Power never announces itself with a trumpet. It arrives quietly, almost politely, slipping into empty spaces left behind by chaos, fear, and neglect. In Chicago of the late 1920s, power had already taken root everywhere. In dockyards, union halls, police precincts, city offices, restaurants, nightclubs, and alleyways. The Chicago outfit did not conquer the city in a single violent surge. It settled into it, layer by layer, decision by decision, favor by favor. And that was precisely the problem. By the time the outfit realized how large it had become, it was already too visible to hide. At first, visibility felt like success. Trucks moved freely through the city at all hours, never stopped. Warehouses operated at full capacity while officially reporting minimal activity. Nightclubs thrived even during economic downturns. Cash changed hands openly in rooms that once whispered. Politicians stopped pretending not to know where the money came from. They simply accepted it as part of the city's bloodstream. The outfit was no longer lurking in the shadows. It was the shadow. But shadows only exist because there is light somewhere behind them. Capone understood something most of his men did not. Growth attracts attention not because it is loud, but because it is consistent. Patterns form. Predictability appears. And predictability is what institutions feed on. Federal agents did not chase rumors. They chased repetition. Why did the same trucking companies always win contracts? Why were certain bars never raided? Why did arrests dissolve before court dates? Why did witnesses vanish not in blood, but in silence? These questions did not need immediate answers. They needed time. Inside the outfit, the change was felt emotionally long before it was understood intellectually. Meetings became longer, heavier, more cautious. Men arrived early and left late, not out of dedication, but suspicion. Conversations stopped when new faces entered rooms. Trust, once organic, became transactional. Capone noticed it everywhere. He noticed it in the way lieutenants avoided committing to decisions without written confirmation, in the way accountants double-checked numbers that had once been accepted on reputation alone, in the way jokes disappeared from the table. The outfit had once felt like a family bound by necessity. Now it felt like a bureaucracy bound by fear of mistakes. Mistakes were no longer personal. They were systemic. And systems punish differently. Capone would sit alone late at night, staring at ledgers spread across heavy oak desks, running his fingers over columns of numbers that represented lives, loyalties, and liabilities. He had built something extraordinary, and now it was too large to control instinctively. Power had become abstract. He could no longer feel it directly. And when power becomes abstract, it becomes fragile. The outfit had expanded faster than its culture could adapt. Men who joined in the early days understood hunger, violence, silence, and patience. Men who joined later understood comfort, status, and entitlement. They did not fear collapse because they had never known instability. This generational divide cut deep. Younger members talked too much. They dressed too loudly. They confused respect with visibility. They believed intimidation was enough, forgetting that intimidation only works when backed by credibility, and credibility depends on discretion. Older members warned them, quietly at first, then harshly, then desperately. But warnings from men who already had everything sounded like jealousy to those who wanted more. Capone saw the shift clearly. The outfit was no longer held together by shared survival. It was held together by profit expectations. And profit expectations turn loyalty into negotiation. Every man began calculating his own value. Every favor became a debt. Every debt became leverage. And leverage corrodes trust. Externally, the pressure mounted invisibly. Federal agencies did not storm buildings or issue public threats. They simply began watching, quietly, methodically, without emotion. The brilliance of their strategy lay in restraint. No arrests meant no alarms. No raids meant no panic. No violence meant no justification for retaliation. The outfit waited for a fight that never came. Instead, the government let the outfit drown in its own complexity. Every shell company required paperwork. Every fake invoice required consistency. Every bribe required intermediaries. Every intermediary required plausible deniability. And plausible deniability collapses under scale. Files multiplied. Records accumulated. Patterns sharpened. The outfit had always believed fear was its ultimate shield, but fear does nothing against patience. Fear makes men reckless. Patience makes institutions deadly. Capone's greatest strength, his ability to think systemically, had become his greatest vulnerability. He had built a machine so efficient that it left traces everywhere it moved. He was no longer fighting rivals. He was fighting arithmetic. The streets still belonged to him, but the streets were no longer where wars were won. Inside the organization, paranoia metastasized. Men wondered who talked, who watched, who recorded, who was late not because of traffic, but because of questioning. Silence, once a sign of discipline, now felt like accusation. Every meeting felt compromised. Every plan felt overheard. Every success felt temporary. The outfit began spending more energy protecting itself than expanding. Growth slowed. Innovation stalled. Fear replaced confidence. Capone tried to respond the only way he knew how, tightening control. More oversight, more structure, more rules, more checks. But rules do not restore belief. They expose its absence. By the time the outfit realized it was no longer invisible, It was already too embedded to retreat. You cannot shrink an empire quietly. You cannot erase infrastructure. You cannot unteach habits. The city had changed. The world had changed. And the Chicago outfit, born from chaos, was now suffocating in order. This was not the end. But it was the point of no return. The Chicago outfit did not collapse because someone suddenly pulled a trigger or signed a single warrant. It began collapsing the moment loyalty stopped being sacred and became negotiable. For decades, silence had been the unbreakable law, not because of fear alone, but because silence was identity. To speak was to erase yourself, not just from the organization, but from history, memory, and meaning. Men endured prison, poverty, and exile because breaking silence meant admitting that everything they had built their lives around was hollow. But the world changed, and with it, the price of silence. The first cracks appeared quietly, almost invisibly. A low-ranking courier missed a meeting and was later found to have moved out of state. A bookmaker vanished without violence. An accountant suddenly developed a taste for privacy and refused to socialize. These were not betrayals yet, just distance. Distance was new. Distance was dangerous. The outfit had always operated on proximity. Everyone knew where everyone lived, who they drank with, who their children were, who they owed money to. Control depended on intimacy. The moment men learned how to disappear without dying, the system lost its grip. Federal investigators understood this better than anyone. They didn't offer protection first. They offered relief. Relief from fear. Relief from endless vigilance. Relief from pretending that loyalty was still worth the cost. Witness protection was not presented as betrayal. It was presented as escape. A new name. A new city. A job, a future where your past no longer hunted you. For the first time in its history, the outfit faced an enemy it could not intimidate. You cannot threaten a man who no longer exists. Inside the organization, rumors spread faster than facts. Someone had talked. Someone had disappeared. Someone had been seen with federal agents. Or so someone claimed. Truth no longer mattered. Suspicion did. Meetings became exercises in restraint. Men watched. Hands more than faces. Voices lowered not out of discipline, but anxiety. Every question felt like a test. Every answer like evidence. Capone felt it immediately. He had always ruled through presence. When he entered a room, conversations adjusted automatically. Not because he demanded it, but because his authority had weight. Now, something was wrong. The room still went quiet, but the silence was different. It wasn't reverence. It was calculation. Men no longer wondered what Capone wanted. They wondered what would happen if he fell. That question alone signaled the beginning of the end. Power survives on inevitability. The moment people imagine a future without you, you have already lost part of your grip. Capone responded instinctively. He tightened the circle, reduced access, limited information, compartmentalized operations. Each man knew less than before, but compartmentalization, while effective against law enforcement, is poison for trust. Men felt excluded, and exclusion breeds resentment. Resentment breeds justification. Justification breeds betrayal. The outfit had once thrived on shared knowledge. Everyone understood the system, even if they didn't control it. Now, ignorance spread. People no longer knew where money flowed, who made decisions, or why certain orders came down. Uncertainty replaced clarity, and uncertainty is unbearable for men who live by risk. Some began hedging their futures. They moved money quietly, reduced exposure, avoided violence, kept notes, not to betray, but just in case. Those notes would later become evidence. The government didn't rush. They let the outfit rot. Every internal conflict saved them effort. Every argument weakened discipline. Every suspicious glance eroded loyalty. Capone sensed the betrayal before it materialized. He felt it in delays, in incomplete reports, in operations that technically succeeded but emotionally failed. People followed orders, but without belief. And belief is the engine of obedience. Without it, power becomes mechanical, fragile, dependent on constant enforcement. Capone hated enforcement. He had built his empire on persuasion, fear balanced by reward, discipline balanced by belonging. Now he was forced to rule through monitoring. That was not leadership. That was containment. The men closest to him understood the danger, but none dared speak it aloud. To acknowledge decay was to invite it. And yet, everyone knew. The outfit was no longer fighting the city. It was fighting entropy. Betrayal did not arrive dramatically. There was no single Judas. There were dozens of small compromises. Men who answered questions they once would have refused. Men who omitted details. Men who delayed warnings. The outfit did not fall because someone talked. It fell because too many people stopped believing silence mattered. And once silence loses meaning, every word becomes a weapon. Capone's greatest fear was not prison. It was irrelevance. To be remembered as the man who built something extraordinary, only to watch it dissolve not in fire, but in paperwork, testimonies, and quiet exits. He still controlled territory, still commanded fear, still had money, but something essential was gone. The outfit had become a collection of individuals again, and a collection of individuals cannot rule a city. This was not collapse yet, but it was irreversible. The betrayal mechanism had activated, and it could not be shut down. By the early 1930s, the Chicago outfit had reached its pinnacle in terms of territory, influence, and fear. Yet, the empire's greatest adversary was no longer a rival gang. It was the federal government itself, slowly but relentlessly closing the net. The law, once a distant rumor ignored by the streets, had evolved into an omnipresent force. Its agents no longer relied on gunfire or haphazard raids. They had strategy, evidence, and the patience of executioners. Capone felt it acutely. Each morning brought reports of new investigations, subpoenas, and surveillance. Every ally whispered about the increasing risk of incarceration. Yet he could not retreat, not without losing the symbolic power he had cultivated for years. Control required presence, and absence meant vulnerability. The federal agents were unlike local police who could be bribed, coerced, or distracted. They were methodical. Every shipment of liquor, every financial ledger, every seemingly innocuous document could be traced. The outfit's accountants, once trusted to launder money, were now scrutinized through financial forensics Capone had never anticipated. It was a war of patience. The government deployed men into the organization, not through overt confrontation, but subtle infiltration. Informants and undercover agents entered nightclubs, speakeasies, and warehouses. They observed patterns, memorized faces, noted routines. They collected evidence not in bullets, but in ledgers, in recordings, in testimonies. And the most terrifying aspect, the outfit did not always know who could be trusted. Within Capone's empire, paranoia began to spread like a silent virus. Men once loyal began second-guessing every order. Requests for bribes became hesitant, payments delayed. Couriers who had operated fearlessly for years now hesitated, questioning the risks with a careful eye. The hierarchy Capone had so meticulously built was bending under the invisible pressure of scrutiny. Yet, outwardly, he maintained the image of omnipotence. Capone's charisma and intimidation were still effective, but inside, the machinery strained. Every decision, once made instinctively, now required careful calculation. He began limiting who had access to which operation. He kept only a tight circle of trusted lieutenants aware of the most critical plans, but even trust had a limit. The higher you rise, the fewer people you can truly count on. The federal net did not operate in isolation. Newspapers began publishing sensational accounts of organized crime, subtly guided by information from confidential sources. Public opinion shifted. Suddenly, the outfit, which had once inspired awe and fear, now faced scrutiny and moral judgment. The social legitimacy that fear had once bought could not compete with headlines, editorials, and congressional inquiries. Capone realized that the fight was no longer just physical. It was psychological and symbolic. The government's strategy was brilliant: to erode confidence, to force the criminal network to doubt itself. And it worked. Tension within the organization grew. Old alliances became fragile. Men questioned loyalties. New leaders, ambitious and impatient, challenged established roles, eager to seize opportunities that Capone's cautious approach now avoided. The internal struggle was invisible but deadly. Capone, once feared for his violence, now feared the subtle erosion of authority more than any rival. He knew that one leak, one misstep, one miscalculated bribe could cascade into disaster. The same men who had admired him for years could now betray him for survival. As the pressure mounted, Capone made adjustments: clandestine meetings in smaller groups, using coded messages, implementing rotation schedules for key operations. Even then, he understood the fundamental vulnerability. The outfit was no longer infallible. Every action now carried a weight that could tip the balance. And then came the laws designed to strike the organization where it was strongest, not through violence, but legality. Tax evasion, federal statutes, interstate commerce regulations, tools of bureaucracy that bypassed guns and fear. Capone's greatest weapon, intimidation, was ineffective against the unyielding machinery of law. Courts, ledgers, and auditors replaced gangsters and bullets. At night, in the confines of his office, Capone would review reports, read memos, and calculate risk. He had built a near-perfect criminal machine, yet now he was fighting invisible enemies on multiple fronts. The outfit could still act, but it was reactive rather than proactive. The illusion of control remained, but the reality was that every move was being watched, measured, and potentially used against him. The psychological strain affected everyone in the organization. Trusted lieutenants argued over distribution of profits, over loyalty of couriers, over methods of evading surveillance. Minor mistakes, delayed payments, missed deliveries, or even rumors of conversations with outsiders were amplified into crises. Capone had to balance authority and trust with unprecedented caution. One wrong decision could unravel decades of empire building. This was the beginning of the outfit's gradual unraveling, not through dramatic battles, not through street wars, but through the relentless, invisible pressure of law, society, and internal doubt. Capone understood it instinctively. Power is not permanent. It can be challenged not only by bullets, but by patience, precision, and pressure. And the outfit, for all its historical dominance, now faced forces it could not control. The story of Capone and the Chicago outfit illustrates a simple truth. No system, however perfectly engineered, can withstand simultaneous internal and external pressure indefinitely. Fear can command obedience, wealth can purchase loyalty, and intelligence can predict patterns. But when every element of a structure is challenged at once, even the most formidable empire begins to crack. Capone had once ruled a city. Now he ruled a fraying empire where every glance could be a betrayal, every conversation a trap, and every profit a potential threat. The shadows he had mastered now felt like enemies. The Chicago outfit, feared and revered for years, was entering a new phase, a phase where survival required more than brutality, more than money, more than strategy. It required adaptation to a world that had changed faster than even Capone could command. By the early 1930s, the Chicago outfit, once an almost mythic institution, was facing its greatest challenge: the relentless pursuit of Al Capone by federal authorities. The empire, built on fear, organization, and bribery, had grown too large to hide. Every operation left traces, every ally could be pressured, and every move was now under federal scrutiny. Capone, who had once been untouchable, realized that the game had changed. His dominance on the streets could no longer guarantee survival. Federal agents began targeting him not through violent confrontations, but through the very vulnerabilities he had overlooked: tax evasion, accounting irregularities, and the flow of money. The psychological pressure mounted. Capone, once confident and unyielding, became a man constantly calculating risk. Night after night, he reviewed ledgers, scrutinized every employee, and monitored movements. But even the most careful planning could not account for the inexorable power of the law. The indictment came. Federal prosecutors, armed with meticulous records of income and expenditures, charged Capone with tax evasion, a crime far removed from the violent acts that had made him infamous. The irony was bitter. The streets feared him for bullets, and yet the government brought him down with numbers. Capone's trial was public spectacle. Reporters, previously fascinated by his audacity, now scrutinized every detail of his life. Witnesses testified, records were examined, and the machinery of justice slowly, inexorably moved forward. The empire that had once seemed invincible began to crumble under the weight of legality. In 1931, Capone was convicted. The sentence was severe: 11 years in federal prison, a massive fine, and forfeiture of assets. His reign, once absolute, had ended not in a gunfight, but in a courtroom. The streets that had whispered his name in fear now watched as their king was taken away, stripped of power and dignity. Inside prison, Capone's health began to decline. Syphilis, untreated in the chaotic years of his dominance, took its toll. The man who had ruled a city with charisma and intimidation was now vulnerable, isolated, and frail. His empire outside continued without him, but it was fragmented. Rivals and ambitious lieutenants filled the power vacuum, diluting the authority Capone had once wielded effortlessly. The psychological impact of imprisonment was profound. Capone, who had defined his identity through dominance and control, now faced the emptiness of inactivity. Respect among criminals in the outside world remained, but it was no longer tangible power. He had become a symbol, a cautionary tale, a legend trapped in a cell. Even after Capone's fall, the Chicago outfit did not disappear. The system he had built, hierarchies, protection networks, and influence over politics, survived, albeit in altered form. The lessons of organization, secrecy, and strategy endured, shaping future generations of criminals. Capone's era became the blueprint for organized crime across the United States. Cities from New York to Los Angeles adopted the structured approach he pioneered. Operations disguised as legitimate businesses, bribery networks, intelligence gathering, and internal governance. The romanticized violence of street gangs gave way to strategic, long-term thinking. Yet, the story of Capone also carried a stark warning. Power without accountability is temporary. His life demonstrated that fear can command obedience, wealth can purchase loyalty, and strategy can extend dominance. But law, patience, and societal oversight can dismantle even the most formidable empire. Historians, filmmakers, and writers immortalized Capone's life, capturing the myth of a man who rose from immigrant neighborhoods to rule a city. The outfit, once a terrifying shadow of Chicago, became a symbol of organized crime, sophistication, and inevitability. The city itself changed. Prohibition ended. The streets, once echoing with gunfire and whispers of the outfit's power, transitioned into normality. Yet the imprint of Capone's leadership, the organizational genius, and the strategic ruthlessness left a permanent mark on criminal history. In the end, the Chicago outfit became a paradox, a system designed to last forever, yet susceptible to collapse when human ambition, external pressure, and legal authority intersected. Capone's name survived as legend, but the man himself, vulnerable, aging, imprisoned, remained a cautionary tale of how the tallest empires can fall. The story concludes not with dramatic gunfights or final massacres, but with a slow, inevitable dismantling, a reminder that every system, no matter how powerful, is ultimately subject to forces beyond its control. And in that truth lies the enduring fascination of the Chicago outfit, a microcosm of human ambition, strategy, and the fragility of power.